everybody, and welcome to Garden Style. So today we're going to cover how to get your garden beds ready for the winter as well as your raised beds in the veggie bed. It's quite a process, but not a complicated one. And basically the rule of thumb is just kind of follow what Mother Nature does for us already. If you take a close look, Mother Nature's pretty on top of things when it comes to getting beds ready for the winter. As you know, all the trees are starting to turn, color, and drop their leaves. And this is Mother Nature's way of actually protecting all the underplantings in the forest. So why wouldn't we do that in our own yard? Utilizing some of the same natural materials that we already have access to. And that's what makes winterizing your garden so easy. So, I'm about to head out to the garden and show you some tips and tricks as to how to get your beds ready for the winter, and it will also cut down on the amount of work you're going to have to do in the spring. So here we go. Okay, so as you can see here in this garden bed, I have a lot of gooseneck loosestrife perennials mixed in with my rose bushes. And this is something I could probably leave, being they have seed heads on them. It's a great way to feed the birds. But I also know that by leaving them here in Washington, where it's so wet during the winters, once we get some snow and all of this gets crushed down to the ground, it will actually harbor insects, fungus, and diseases. And that is something I don't want, as well as slugs. And slugs are a big problem here in Washington. So rather than encouraging more pests and disease, I'm going to cut these all the way down to the ground. Now, as I start to take you on a little tour, you will see all the different perennials that I have in here, most of which I am going to cut down to the ground. But then there are some, like the Rebecchias that you see here with their black seed heads. I will actually leave those for the winter. The birds feed on them throughout the season, and that's somebody we want to keep happy, are the birds. But you'll notice right behind here I have some bee balm with a serious case of powdery mildew. This usually happens, especially with this particular variety of plant, in the late summer, early fall, due to the fact that they're dry, they're stressed, and we've had a whole lot of rain just in this past week. So that is something I definitely want to cut out. But I'm not going to throw those in the compost pile. In fact, this is something I will probably burn or put in the waste can and have it taken away. Any type of disease plants like this you do not want to keep around so that you're not spreading this type of thing throughout the rest of your garden. So that's a perfect example of something you want to just cut all the way back to the ground. And then you'll see right behind them, I have some goldenrod that has also gone to seed. And just due to the size of the plants, they're coming down. Because as soon as we get snow, of course, they'll all be smashed down and creating a nice little haven for pests and disease. And that is not something we want. So I will show you an example as to how I cut these back, and then I actually move mulch over the tops of the crowns. Mulch, fern leaves, pine straw, any of that will actually help protect the top of the plant from frost and heave, or frost heave during the winter time. And you'll notice some new growth coming up through there in the spring as soon as the temperatures warm up. So here we go. Okay, so for all of this tall growth, I'm just going to go in and start whacking it all the way to the ground. Just like that. Then we have smaller perennials like these geraniums here, which have a lot of dead growth in with them. It is perfectly okay to go back and just whack these guys all the way to the ground, just like this. And what that's going to do is remove a lot of this dead material in here, which will harbor pests, insects, that sort of thing. And then you're getting down to where some of the new growth is going to be coming in during the spring. And what I will do is I'll either lay fern leaves, pine straw, whatever, into the crowns in here. I don't want it to be too thick due to the amount of rain that we have here in the Northwest. But that also keeps them protected. And quite honestly, some of these perennials I have grown for years, and they are so hardy, I don't really need to do anything to them, but just clean them up. But as an extra protection, especially with all the rain that we have, I don't want them to rot, I'll usually take some pine straw and lay it over the top. So not only does that protect it from the frost, but it also keeps the rain and the moisture from sitting right directly on top of the crown of the plant, which will eventually rot it up here in the Northwest. All of you may not have that issue, but the same with snow. If you live in an area that's really, really cold and you get a lot of snow, having some sort of protection of pine straw, chopped up leaves, hay, even grass clippings at this point would be a great way to protect these plants. I've been known to use fern leaves. We have evergreen sword ferns here in the Northwest, and those are also awesome for helping to keep moisture off the crowns of your perennial plants. But honestly, I usually don't go through all that trouble. I have pine trees in the front, and all I got to do is fill up a wheelbarrow full of pine straw, and I'll utilize that amongst all of my perennial beds. So that's a quick, easy way to start trimming up a lot of your perennials. And here I just, rather than do a video, I'd like to just get going and get this started. We had a lot of fog this morning, so there's still a little bit of moisture in the air, but it is a perfect day. It's in the 50s to get out here and just get a lot of this manual labor done because it's cool. And it's one of the reasons I love the fall. Not only because I'm going to get a little bit of a break during the wintertime, but also because it starts to clean up the beds and just get everybody ready for the spring, which was something I didn't have a whole lot of time for last year. So got some time this year and I'm going to make good use of it. So there you go, just some basic tips on how to get your garden beds ready for the wintertime. Okay, so you can see where I've gotten all the gooseneck loosestrife cut down to the ground. I've trimmed up the geraniums, but I have left the rose bushes. This is something I don't want to trim right now, as I don't want to encourage more new growth. However, I have had deer in the yard the last couple days, and they did do a little trimming, but they didn't damage them too much. I just leave my rose bushes until February, and then I hack them back. But for now, I want them to decide on their own that it is time to go to sleep. So if I leave the old flowers and the old rose hips on them, in fact, for those of you who don't know what a rose hip is, let me show you. This is a rose hip. So as you can see on the bottom here, you see this bulbous part. There you go. That will tell it it's time to go dormant, and I'll just leave it. And you'll notice this very same plant still has a flower on it as well. So I just let them go to sleep. I stop bothering them. I'm not going to cut it back. And that will actually tell it to go dormant. So no need to trim the rose bushes at this time of the year. Okay, and now I'm going to take you over to this side of the garden. Over to, this just happens to be your typical Marguerite daisy perennial. And I'm going to show you how I go about cutting this back. Okay, so as I look underneath the plant, there's a lot of new growth down here at the bottom. But what I want to do is actually just grab a handful of the old stalks. They were absolutely gorgeous this year. And I'm going to cut back down to the new growth. See how I'm doing that? So there's the new growth that has come in since then. And I'll actually go through here and I'm going to leave that on there. And I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. But it's important that I get rid of these old stalks. That is the nasty stuff that starts to harbor insects, slugs, and of course fungus and diseases. But by doing this, not only am I letting light in to the plant, but I'm also letting in some air so that it can circulate and keep things from getting fungus and mildew and that sort of thing on them. So I just go through here. Easy peasy. Okay. And then I'll just clean out some of the old leaves, and voila, they're ready to go for the spring. So, really important, of course, that you have a nice sharp pair of pruners. I, of course, swear by Felco's. But you'll notice there's some rudbeckia in the back here. I'm actually going to leave those, but I'm going to tackle the diseased bee balm right behind it. So here we go. Okay, diseases out. And what I will do is start to rake up all the little leaves and everything that are still left in there and get it nice and clean. And it will be ready to go for the winter. I'm not going to mulch them. I'm not going to put anything on top, just due to the fact that I know they are super hardy down to, you know, minus 20 degrees. And it's a rare event we get below 15 degrees here in Washington. So just keep an eye on what kind of perennials you have and how hardy they are, especially in your zone. Definitely want to know your zone. And that will tell you pretty much how to treat your perennials for the winter time. Most of mine I do not have to mulch, just due to the fact, you know, they're super hardy in my zone 8. But look up your zone, of course the plants that you have, so that you can understand how to winterize them. So I go through and do the massive cleanup, just due to the fact I don't want to deal with it in the spring. I'm so anxious to plant, transplant, divide, that I want most of this work done and taken care of. And as you can see, I still have a little bit more to go. Alright you guys, moving on to the veggie bed. Okay, so here's a shot of my veggie bed. And you will notice that I have garlic planted at the moment. So before you go to overwinter your veggie bed, determine what it is you're going to do with them. If you still have plants in them, then I will show you how to go about preparing them for the winter. Now I usually have garlic, onions, a lot of times there's potatoes still left in this particular bed. So, and as you can tell, I've got garlic sprouting already. I had these sitting in the garage waiting to go in the ground. I was like, oh my God, I need to get them in the ground. So in they go, and I'm going to start covering them up. And after that, I will show you what I do to help protect the soil as well as nourish it during the winter. Okay, so what I have done here for this particular bed is I've actually laid down pine straw. It's the best description I can come up with. And that is only because these beds are pretty well new. Just put them in this year. I had replaced some old ones. So the soil that's in here is very well composted. There's still quite a bit of nutrients still left in the soil. So it's not necessary for me to actually add compost to it, like chicken manure, old rotten leaves, that sort of thing. I can actually do that in the spring. But the worst thing you can do with your veggie beds, or any bed for that matter, is leave the soil bare. You definitely want to cover it to some degree. And the reason for that is during the winter, when you're getting a lot of rain or you have a lot of snow, a lot of those nutrients in the soil can actually get leached down to the bottom part of your raised beds. So all the good stuff starts sinking down to the bottom. And in order to avoid that, you can put a nice fresh coat on top, just like a blanket is basically what it is. Mind you, what I said earlier is follow what Mother Nature does, and that is cover the soil and put a blanket on top of all the soil, so that way you're not only leaching out all the nutrients, but during the winter time, while it's cold, it's actually going to help to compost it down and add more nutrients to it. And this way, when we have frost or that sort of thing, it's not going to do a frost heave in here or damage the microbes that are currently sitting in the soil, doing their thing to help break down all the organic material. So you could use pine straw like this. You could use leaves that you've chopped up from the mower and put them over the top. You can use hay. There's several different ways you can go about covering your raised beds to prepare them for winter. Now, if you have a bed that has not had any composted material added to it since the early spring, and you had it well planted, I'm a type of person that doesn't believe in tilling the soil. And they have proven that the less you till it, the more it can create more microbes, earthworms, that sort of thing, and it will actually help to break itself down so that it adds more nutrients to the plants that you're putting in it. So when I do this and put a blanket on top, and this is fairly new soil that's in here, what that's going to do is allow all those little microbes, earthworms, that sort of thing, to continue to keep doing their thing during the wintertime. And that is breaking down all the organic material in the soil, thus making it even better for you during the spring. Aha, Mother Nature, she's pretty smart. But for those of you who need to add compost, you can certainly add your chicken manure, cow manure, anything like that. Do that in the fall, and that way it has the winter to actually start to break down, so it's not so strong or pungent is probably the best word I can come up with in the spring. You can over compost a garden bed, especially with strong things like chicken manure and cow manure. It does need time in order to break down so that it's actually adding nutrients to your plants rather than burning your plants. It is possible to do that, so you need to be careful about that kind of thing. But for me, these are very new beds, very new soil, and I'll add a little more composted material to it in the spring, and the plants will just do really well. Not to mention, I have things planted underneath, like the garlic bulbs that you saw, onions, that sort of thing. So I don't really want to be adding any more composted material to the top, but this will help protect it. And up here in the Northwest, where it's so rainy and so wet, it'll keep the nutrients from leaching through the soil and of course exposing all the rocks and all the other things on top. So it's just a nice protective blanket for your veggie beds. And then in the spring, what I will do is actually brush this off, and I just find pine straw to be so easy to use for that, or composted leaves, hay. You can actually brush what hasn't composted down into the soil in the spring and just brush it off and start planting, which is why it makes it so easy. But just a reminder, cover the soil in your garden beds or in your veggie beds. Either way, as long as the soil is protected and it's not bare, you will find that it will do so much better for your plants. It will act better, and you'll find after a couple of years of adding composted material and having things breaking down during the wintertime, you'll have this luscious, rich, composted soil that you don't have to struggle with. You don't even need fertilizer at that point. They certainly didn't have fertilizer back in the day until they started to put it into bags. This is how they would go about adding more nutrients and compost to the garden beds. So there you go. Got the garlic planted in the other one, and they are now down and ready to go to sleep for the wintertime, even though they're not really sleepy. There's still little microbes in there doing their magic over the wintertime, and this will just help it out. All right, you guys. Of course, any questions you may have, you can get a hold of me at GardnStyleNW.com or GardnStyleNwest@gmail.com. And there's lots of room in the box down below for any comments that you may have. And I'm sure a lot of you are wondering about this special project that I'm working on, and I hope to shoot out a video this coming week unveiling what my new project is. I'm so excited about it. It's going to be a big change for me, but didn't want to announce anything until it was actually done and official. So I will certainly be unveiling that this coming week. All right, it has turned out to be a beautiful day. I've had the sun in my eyes, so hopefully there's not too much glare as far as the camera is concerned. But yeah, get out there and start protecting the soil in your garden beds, start cutting things back. It's that time to start laying everybody to sleep. All right, we will definitely be talking very soon. Bye for now.